What if I told you that the favourite for this year's World Cup is Spain?
Nice curl! Williams down!
Remember, they crushed France with ease 5-1 after 67 minutes. France is more like the Madrid of Spain, full of stars but less a team. Let me tell you why the rest of the world should be scared of Spain. But let's get back to that night in Germany first. Stuttgart, the 5th of June, 2025. The 55th minute. Spain is sitting on a 4-0 lead over France, the reigning World Cup runners-up. The plan was working. Pedri had glided through midfield like he was wearing slippers on a freshly polished floor. The wingers of Spain have been a nightmare again. France looked broken. Their manager, Didier Deschamps, was on the touchline doing that French gesture. That means we are in trouble. And also, I am pretending I am not in trouble. Then Kylian Mbappe scores a penalty. Then Ryan Cherki turns the match around alone. Then Daniel Vivian sticks one into his own net. Then Randall Kolo Muani heads a fourth in added time. 5-4. Except it isn't, because Spain had already scored 5. They held on 54. Final whistle. Lamine Yamal walks off with 2 goals to his name, and a smile that suggests he'd been doing this for 15 years instead of 1. This was the highest scoring match in Nations League history. It was also the first time France had conceded 5 goals in a single match since 1969, when most of their current squad's grandparents were still in school. So the message was pretty clear. The European champions had grown up. They were no longer just defending, they were hunting. And next year in the United States, Mexico and Canada, they're coming for the only trophy that's eluded their golden generation, the big one. This is the story of how Spain rebuilt themselves into the most terrifying team in football, not by going back to tiki-taka, by burning it to the ground. And what their rebuild means for everyone else trying to win a World Cup in 2026. To understand why this version of Spain is so dangerous, you need to understand what they used to be. For most of the 20th century, Spain were a punchline. Not bad, just cursed. The kind of team that always had the players and never had the trophies. Their nickname was La Furia Roja, the Red Fury, which sounds intimidating, until you remember they spent 44 years winning nothing between 1964 and 2008. Their playing style, before everything changed, was direct physical cross. It in hope someone's tall enough. Spanish football was essentially British football, with better weather. In 1982, they hosted the World Cup at the Bernabeu and got knocked out in the second round by West Germany and a goalless draw with England. The manager got sacked standard. In 1984, they reached the Euro final and lost to France. In 1994, they got cheated out of a World Cup semi-final by Italy after Mauro Tassotti elbowed Luis Enrique's nose into a different time zone. The referee somehow missed it. Tassotti got an 8-match ban afterwards. Luis Enrique got a broken face and a plane ticket home. The pattern continued. Euro 96, lost to England on penalties. World Cup 98 group stage exit after Andoni Zubizarreta's mistake gifted Nigeria a winner. Euro 2000, Raul missed a penalty in injury time against France, sent it into low orbit. Spain lost 2-1, and they will have to suffer again. They are used to it. 44 years of this. The dictionary definition of choking. And then, a man named Luis Aragonés looked at his squad after the 2006 World Cup and decided something heretical. He decided that physicality was not the answer. He decided that Spaniards were never going to outmuscle Germans, and they should stop trying. What Spain had instead was a generation of players being produced by a converted farmhouse in Catalonia called La Masia. Players raised on a Dutch idea called total football, repackaged by Johan Cruyff players. Keeping the ball. That was tiki-taka, and from 2008 to 2012, it broke world football. The roll call reads like a fantasy draft. Xavi, Iniesta, Cesc Fabregas, David Silva, David Villa, Fernando Torres, Carles Puyol, Sergio Ramos, Iker Casillas, Marcos Senna, doing the dirty work so the artists could paint. Xavi was 5'7" and rewired what was possible. His passing range was unlimited, but he chose to play short, always short. Rondo, 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 as he later called it in The Guardian. You learn responsibility. You learn not to lose the ball. If you lose the ball, you go in the middle. Iniesta was telepathic with him. Two small men passing a ball in tight spaces, with the patience of monks and the precision of surgeons. At one point in 2010, Xavi and Iniesta finished second and third in the Ballon d'Or behind Messi. Three Barcelona midfielders on the podium. The world had simply given up arguing with what was happening. Euro 2008. Spain won every group game, beat Italy on penalties in the quarter-finals, breaking a curse that had lasted since the 1920 Olympics. Marcos Senna, stepping up calmly to slot home the third spot kick, with all the body language of a man buying groceries, drained Russia in the semi by simply refusing to give them the ball back. The Russian coach said afterward, if they keep touching the ball, the opposition gets fatigued, and they know they will score. Beat Germany 1-0 the final on a Fernando Torres goal that aged into folklore. 44 years of nothing, then everything. World Cup 2010, same approach, different continent. Iniesta scored the only goal of the final in extra time against the Netherlands, then ran to the corner flag, lifted his shirt, and revealed a tribute to a friend who had died of a heart attack. Spain became world champions. Even their celebrations had weight to them. Euro 2012. They went one better and humiliated Italy 4-0 the final. The same Italy that had haunted Spanish football for 90 years. The score was not the score was a statement. 3 major tournaments in a row, the greatest international team ever assembled. Football that looked less like sport and more like a religion practiced by very polite assassins. And then the universe, as it tends to, started taking notes. Tiki-taka died slowly, then all at once. The 2014 World Cup. Defending champions Spain were drawn against the Netherlands in the group stage. A rematch of the 2010 final. Spain led 1-0. Then Robin van Persie scored a flying header that became the most replayed goal of the tournament. Then the Dutch scored 4 more. Spain lost 5-1 to the team they dethroned 4 years earlier. They were eliminated in the group stage. Euro 2016. Round of 16. Exit to Italy. World Cup 2018. Knocked out by Russia on penalties. The host nation, with Vladimir Putin watching from the stands like a cat with a half-dead mouse. What had happened was simple. The world had learned the cheat code. You could let Spain have the ball. You could absorb the passes. You could just sit deep and wait, because the magic only worked when there was space to pass into. Take away the space, and the masters of possession became masters of moving the ball sideways until they fell asleep. Spain had a new generation of midfielders, but they weren't Xavi and Iniesta. They were imitations. The pass was still pretty. The pass had nothing behind it. They held the ball. They created nothing. It was all foreplay, no goals. That was the verdict on Spanish football for 10 years. The kingdom had fallen. The empire had been catalogued and dismantled. By 2022, they were losing to Morocco in a World Cup round of 16, a result that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier and was now barely surprising. And then something quiet started happening. Down in the academies, in Catalonia, in the Basque country, in Madrid. A new Spain was being built, out of completely different parts. Luis de la Fuente took over as Spain manager in December 2022. A former youth coach, a man who'd never managed a senior club. The Spanish press was, charitably, unimpressed. He looked like an accountant. He spoke like an accountant. The headlines wrote themselves, and not generously. What the press missed was that De La Fuente had spent a decade coaching Spain's youth teams. He won the Under-19 Euros and also won the Under-21 Euros. He knew every kid coming through the system because he'd developed them himself. The federation didn't hire a stranger. They promoted the man who had been quietly building the next generation in the background for 10 years. He immediately did something his predecessors had been too proud to do. He looked at what Spain actually had, instead of what Spain used to have. And what Spain had was not a midfield of pure passers. Spain had wingers. Genuine, terrifying, one-on-one wingers. Lamine Yamal had broken into the Barcelona first team at 15 years old. Nico Williams was tearing the La Liga title race apart from Athletic Bilbao's left wing. Spain hadn't produced wingers like this since the directional days of the 1980s, and under Aragonés and Vicente del Bosque, they hadn't needed to. The whole point of tiki-taka was that wingers were converted midfielders. Look at where Iniesta played at the 2010 World Cup. Left wing, he was a central midfielder. They all were. De La Fuente looked at Yamal and Williams and asked a question that no Spanish coach had asked in 20 years. What if we just gave them the ball and let them go? Euro 2024 was the answer. Spain won every single match. 7 games, 7 wins. The first team in European Championship history to do it. They beat Croatia, Italy, Albania, Georgia. They beat hosts Germany in extra time in the quarter-finals on a Mikel Merino header that broke a nation's heart in their own stadium. They beat France in the semi, with the 16 years old scoring one of the most ridiculous goals you will ever see in a competitive international fixture, curling it past Mike Maignan from 20 yards. They beat England in the final. The football looked nothing like Xavi and Iniesta. It looked, ironically, more like what Spain had been before tiki-taka. Direct, vertical, pacey. 2 wingers running at fullbacks like they'd insulted their mothers, specific over generic. The wingers were now the show. Williams scored in the final. Yamal won the Young Player of the tournament at 17 years old, the youngest player ever to do so. To put that in perspective, when Spain won their first European Championship in 1964, Yamal's grandfather was 9. Spain had won their 4th European Championship. They'd done it without keeping the ball more than their opponents in several matches. The conductors of football's prettiest symphony had pulled out a guitar and started playing punk. So what does the current Spain squad actually look like? In goal, Unai Simons. Solid, anonymous, in the best possible way. The job of a Spanish keeper is not to be famous. In defence, Lenormand and Dean Huijsen at centre-back. Huijsen is the new model. 6'4", comfortable on the ball, looks like he's slightly bored in possession. He moved to Real Madrid in 2025 for €60 million, becoming one of the most expensive defenders in the world before his 21st birthday. At fullback, Pedro Porro on the right and Marc Cucurella on the left. Yes, the same Cucurella who arrived at Chelsea for an eye-watering fee and spent 2 years being a meme. He grew into one of the best left-backs of Euro 2024. Football is humbling like that. The midfield is where things get scary. Rodri sits at the base. He won the Ballon d'Or in 2024 because he was, by some distance, the best player on the planet. He tore his ACL shortly after lifting it and missed most of the following season. He came back. He's still Rodri, possibly the most complete defensive midfielder of his generation. Behind him in the queue is Martin Zubimendi. Most national teams would build their entire structure around Zubimendi. For Spain, he's the backup. Then there's Pedri, 23 years old. Plays like Iniesta if Iniesta had Xavi's brain implanted. The most natural Spanish midfielder since La Masia's golden batch. When he's fit and dictating play from deep, Spain look like the Spain. In front of him, Fabian Ruiz. Underrated for years because he plays at PSG, where everyone is too busy losing their minds over forwards to notice the midfielder running the show. The forward line is where the death blow comes from. On the right, Lamine Yamal, the most talked about teenager in football. A player who turned 18 in 2025 and was already being compared to Lionel Messi, which would be insulting if he wasn't, actually that good. 2-footed, composed, genuinely fearless. He has done things in big games at 17 that grown men spend their careers trying to do once. On the left, Nico Williams, pure pace, the acceleration of a sprinter combined with the touch of a number 10. He cooks fullbacks alive. Bayern Munich, Arsenal, and half of Europe have spent 2 years trying to sign him. Athletic Bilbao keeps saying no. In the middle, Mikel Oyarzabal, a centre-forward who turns into prime David Villa whenever he wears red. He scored the winner against England in the Euro final. He converted the equaliser against Portugal in the Nations League final. This is a squad, not a team. There are no obvious weak spots. There are layers behind every layer. If 3 players got injured tomorrow, the replacements would be other countries' starters. There's only one slight problem with all of this. 3 days after Spain beat France 5-4, they walked out at the Allianz Arena to play Portugal in the Nations League final. Same stadium where Bayern Munich won their last Champions League. Same arena where, in a sense, German football's modern era began. The vibes were not subtle. They led 2-1 with 30 minutes left. Cristiano Ronaldo, 40 years old and supposedly past his prime, equalised. The match went to extra time. The match went to penalties. Alvaro Morata missed his spot kick. Portugal won 5-3 on penalties. Cristiano lifted the trophy and cried, which is something he does once every 18 months, whether he needs to or not. Spain had been 1 penalty away from defending their Nations League title. They left Munich with silver medals. Again, because they'd done the same thing 2 years earlier when they actually won this tournament. But this was the 3rd successive Nations League final they'd played in, and the 2nd time they'd left one in agonising fashion across 4 years. You can read that one of 2 ways. Read it darkly, and you say Spain still know how to choke. The old curse, the Tassotti elbow, the Raúl penalty in 2000, the DNA never really left. 44 years of being almost good enough doesn't disappear because you bought a new coat. Read it generously, and you say Spain are now so good that they reach Nations League finals as a baseline. They've played in 3 consecutive Nations League finals across 4 years. No other country has done that. They're outperforming every European peer by such a margin that the discussion is whether they'll lose finals, not whether they'll get there. I lean toward the generous reading. Because the team that lost to Portugal in June 2025 was missing key players, played 120 minutes in the semi-final 3 days earlier, and still took the eventual champions to penalties in a final. And because the team going to North America in 2026 has had a full year to recover, to integrate, to learn, to watch the tape of Morata's penalty and quietly write his name down on a list nobody else will see. Here's the math. Argentina won the last World Cup with Lionel Messi at 35 years old, playing the tournament of his life. Messi will be 38 at the next one. He may or may not start. Argentina will be good. They will not be that good. The fairy tale ran out of pages. France have the squad to win it on paper. They also have a chronic inability to score goals, while Kylian Mbappe is on the pitch with them. Their defence at the Nations League semi against Spain looked like a charity match. 5 goals conceded, all of them avoidable, several of them embarrassing. The first time they've shipped 5 since 1969. A French paper called it the worst defensive performance of the Deschamps era. They were not wrong. Brazil are rebuilding under new management for the 8th time this decade. Carlo Ancelotti finally took over in 2025, the first foreign coach in Brazil's history, which is the kind of fact that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. He has talent. He does not yet have a team. Germany are improving, but were knocked out by Spain in their own backyard at the last Euros and got bullied by Portugal in the Nations League semi at home. Their golden generation is in its early 20s. It is not yet golden. England have the players, the manager, and the history of underperformance. They lost the last 2 Euro finals. They will be fancied. They will probably lose to Spain again at some point. It's tradition now. A whole nation grieving in a very dignified, very British way every few summers. And Spain. Spain have the youngest superstar in the sport, the best defensive midfielder in the world, depth at every position, a manager who finally figured out the assignment, and a year of preparation before the biggest tournament on the planet. Their average age in the Nations League semi against France was around 25. By the time the 2026 final kicks off in New Jersey, Yamal will be 18, Williams will be 23, Pedri will be 23, Huijsen will be 21, Kubasi, his defensive partner, will be 19. This is not the end of a cycle, this is the beginning. If Spain win the 2026 World Cup, they'll have completed something nobody has done in modern football. They'll have built two entirely different golden generations back to back. Two different playing styles, two different sets of stars, two different generations of trophies. The tiki-taka era and the vertical Spain era, separated by 10 years of misery in the middle and connected by the same scarlet shirt. The universe loves symmetry. It also loves to torture Spain. The two impulses don't always agree. But right now, in 2026, with this squad, in this form, with this manager finally getting it right, the safe bet is on the red shirts. The tiki-taka era's surviving members watched on TV as their successors annihilated France 5-4 inches. Xavi was somewhere in Qatar with a contract. Iniesta retired in 2024. Their style of football is gone. Their successors don't need it. The students aren't trying to be the teachers. They've decided they prefer being themselves. And the results are arguing in their favour. Spain didn't go back. They went forward. And the rest of the world is going to find out what that means in 18 months, on the largest stage football has. Be very afraid, because this is not a team that will just come to play and have some fun. They will go to the World Cup and destroy everyone. If you can get 5 past teams like France, what you will do to teams like Saudi Arabia or Cape Verde, they better be ready, because if they won't be, it will be a very long night for them.